my real excitement about being able to kick off the speaker series for the 2021 academic year in the Department of Criminology. The last speaker we had series arranged was canceled due to COVID. We didn't know if we were going to be able to do this again, and if so, when. All of us got increasingly more proficient with electronic means of meeting, Zoom, Teams. People have been very friendly to the University of South Florida, advancing our capabilities with Teams so that we can have very large meetings. And this constitutes one of those. And I'm excited that we have today's guest to launch the meeting. We have Art and Jolene Hushen. They are alumni from the University of South Florida. Art is an alumnus of the Department of Criminology, and even took one of my classes 372 years ago. And I'm surprised that after that awful experience, he was willing to come back. But nonetheless, he's elected to risk it once again. The Hushens are also friends of the university and friends of the department, and we're really excited to be able to welcome them. They are the co-owners of the National Institute of Crime Prevention. Art serves as its president, Joel as the executive director. The National Institute for Crime Prevention is a consulting and training firm, particularly with regard to CPTED. CPTED is an acronym, refers to crime prevention through environmental design. As you will hear today, as they discuss what the National Institute for Crime Prevention does, what CPTED is, why and how it is an exciting opportunity for the department. It is more than just turning on lights, right? That's something you're going to discover. It's not as simplistic as some make it out to be. It is an approach to crime prevention that is employed by businesses, schools, downtown districts, entertainment districts, universities, the works. I mean, any place where human beings can congregate are places where crime can take place. As criminologists, we kind of recognize that there can be features of the built environment that might be conducive to criminality, as well as non-conducive, as preventative, to dissuade potential offenders. And what the National Institute of Crime Prevention does, what CPTED does, is try to educate us as how we can purposefully design or redesign our built environments so that it has a crime preventive function. So with that, I'm going to ask if all the audience members would please mute their microphones so they won't get feedback. In a moment, we will turn the presentation over to Art and Joel and ask them to give their presentation. They can take the amount of time they feel comfortable giving it, at which point I will kind of monitor the raising and lowering of electronic hands for question and answers, comments, etc. And when we have exhausted that, I have closing remarks I'd like to make. So again, welcome Art and Joel, welcome the various guests who've been invited to this presentation. To all my colleagues, my grad students, I welcome you as well. Let's kick it off. Thank you, Art and Joel. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cochran, for allowing us to be part of this. Any chance I have to talk about CPTED, I'm going to take it. CPTED, my involvement started back in the early 90s, and an opportunity to really come back to my university and talk about it. That's an exciting part of that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring up the screen and get that going. So I'm going to share that with everyone. So hopefully everyone sees that okay as we kick this off. We discussed how we're going to put this together, what did we want to cover, and we thought, well, the best way is just to start at the very beginning, from 1971 and what we're doing with CPTED today. My name is Art Hushin, as Dr. Cochran mentioned, president of the National Institute of Crime Prevention. Founded this in 1999, 30-year background in law enforcement, retired from the Tampa Police Department. Have a BA in criminology from the University of South Florida. Probably the hardest class I took was Dr. Cochran's class. So again, just a reminder for those of you that are taking them, I did pass it. It wasn't easy, but I did pass it. We have the Septa Designation through the NICP. Part of what I did was I designed the state of Florida Septa Professional Designation out of the Attorney General's office. I'm also the past chair many times over the Florida Design on Crime Association. I'm sure not too many people even realize there was a CPTED network within the state of Florida, which we refer to as Design on Crime. Been a member of the American Planning Association for some time, and I'm a member of the ASS chapter. West Coast is going to be the Tampa Bay chapter for the American Society for Industrial Security.
Good morning, I'm Joelle Hushin. Thank you for joining us this morning. My USF connection, as Dr. Cochran mentioned, is that I'm alumni as well. I also worked at USF for 10 years, and I am a member of the USF chapter of National Academy, and I'm currently the executive director for the National Institute of Crime Prevention. So we started the NICP back in '99, and so we've always focused mainly on the application of CPTED, providing practitioners the knowledge and confidence to apply CPTED in their communities. Next slide. There you go.
In the beginning, talking about when this started, 1971, for many of us that have been involved with CPTED, we all know where the founder of the program was, and that's going to be with C. Ray Jeffrey. He wrote the book called Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. He contended the way to prevent crime was to design the total environment in order to reduce those opportunities for crime. What surprised a lot of people, especially when we're doing our workshops around the U.S., is we ask them, well, do you know who coined the phrase or where this came from? A lot of what we get back, well, it's a theory, we understand that, but C. Ray Jeffrey actually called it CPTED. So from 1971, the start, and then we get up to 1973 with Oscar Newman, who wrote the book Creating Defensible Space. Now, he developed 4 concepts to talk about the physical design of building and the occurrence of crime. Territoriality, as far as ownership, how people interact with that space, surveillance, being able to see what's taking place around you, building image, which for us ties directly into maintenance. So we get into this whole scheme of colors and ownership, and then environmental land use, which for a lot of us will relate back to zoning. What's taking place around us? What has that land been zoned for as we think about future development? So from 1973 all the way up to about the early 90s, there wasn't a lot of activity with CPTED. It was there, but not too many cities were even thinking about adding this to, for example, planning and zoning or some of their design standards. The FBI did a paper on it a while back in one of their journals. There was some talk about it. I believe Westinghouse got involved with it just a little bit. But it wasn't until about 1991 where we saw this reemergence of CPTED. And that was with Tim Crow. He was the director of the National Crime Prevention Institute out of the University of Louisville. And he also wrote a book called CPTED. Now, Tim Crow introduced me to CPTED about 1993. This was my first kind of going into what this all applied. I thought I had a good understanding of communities and policing. So my background in that would be with Trajano, what's up at Michigan State University, the National Foot Patrol Center, Lee Brown, the storefront program out of Houston, working with that group as well, the CPOP program out of New York. What Tim did was he opened up my eyes to this one statement: why don't we build it right the first time? And that really stuck with me throughout my entire career. And I started asking designers, I started asking architects, well, why don't we build it this way? Well, it's not required. It's not part of our zoning code. So as a result of that, I realized this is where we really need to start focusing on CPTED. And that is going to be taking a look at design guidelines and strategies. Now, if I didn't mention Jane Jacobs, I just couldn't be able to go forward. Jane Jacobs, the book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities back in 1961, she was the one that really began to focus on neighborhoods, what makes up a community. She came up with this concept called eyes on the street, must be able to look onto the street from inside the building. But we took that and we really began to build off of eyes on the street, not only from neighbor development, residential, but this is also branched into terror mitigation, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. But her book, Death and Life of Great American Cities, is mandatory reading for several people involved in urban design coming to graduate school. I have a copy of it, I read it several times. And again, how we design the space. How do we design those storefronts? How do we design that outdoor seating area that brings more eyes on the street, which can serve as a deterrence to crime. How do I codify that? CPTED is defined as a proper design, effective use of the built environment that can lead to reduction in fear of incidents of crime and an improvement of the quality of life. So when we highlight proper design and effective use, what does proper design mean? Well, for us, it looks at, well, how do we build it? How do we design it? What's my building setback? What's my building orientation? What's the width of my sidewalk? How does my landscaping fit into this as well? What about alleyways? What about how many windows on my building? What amount of transparency do I need to bring those eyes to the street? How do I design the green space to bring the eyes out into the park? How do I design the common area to bring the eyes out towards the main entryway? And then what is the effective use? What strategies do we have in place to ensure that people use that space in a positive way, that they show ownership? So a lot of us spend, for example, our training 64 hours just to be able to apply this to proper design and effective use back with their city or back with their company that they're involved with or their school. Proper design and effective use. Now, the goal of CPTED is to reduce, not eliminate, reduce the opportunities for crime that may be inherent in the design of structures or in the design of neighborhoods. Going back to C. Ray Jeffries on how we design the total environment. So reduce those opportunities. And even in his initial research or studies that were coming out, he said to limit those opportunities for crime. You know, knowing we can't get rid of all crime, but can we make it difficult for the offender? That we can do. And we accomplish this through involvement of CPTED practitioners in the planning development and design review of all community projects. Under the CPTED model, we look at design define, and that includes the physical design, social management, and directives that seek to affect positively human behavior as people interact with their environment. What we find with practitioners and designers as well, everyone's very good at designing the site, but how do I incorporate social management? How do I have those rules in place that ensure people use the space for its intended purpose? So this is an area we focus on under the CPTED program. We also look at the environment defined, and that includes people and their physical and social, how we build it, how we use it, how we program activities within that space to encourage that people take ownership, bring more eyes to that site, and in turn, that makes it a little difficult for the offender to be successful. Law enforcement side, we see a reduction in crime rate. We also see a reduction in calls for police service. So again, lots of opportunities to get this done. CPTED is based off these 4 overlapping strategies, which are natural surveillance, natural access control, territorial reinforcement, and maintenance. Now, the predominant one out of all these is natural surveillance. When I work with different groups around the country, we're holding our sessions, natural surveillance comes up quite a bit. You know, the type of fencing we use to promote natural surveillance. Transparency, for example, downtown corridors requiring 70% transparency on their storefront to provide that natural surveillance. Natural access control, again, how do I guide people to where they need to go to? Territorial reinforcement, how I show that ownership, and then maintenance. And maintenance is a key part. Really want to emphasize that. We do a series of workshops with planners. And for example, we did one up in the city of Raleigh, and we had teams doing assessments, CPTED assessments of parks. And what was surprising, when we had the teams come back to present, we asked them how many issues in that city park could have been addressed with a good maintenance plan. Not adding cameras, not adding additional patrol, security, just maintenance. And the largest number I got was 90%. 90% of issues within that space could have been addressed with a good maintenance plan. So again, these are the 4 overlapping strategies that we talk about when we focus on applying CPTED in our city or within that company. Now, natural surveillance increases the perception that people can be seen. We talk about the placement of physical features and activities that maximizes visibility. And there's a lot of ways we can do that, so I'm going to highlight a few of these as we go through this. Designing landscape that allows clear, unobstructed views of surrounding areas. And how do I ensure that working with landscape architects? I know by city code, we have to provide landscaping, but nothing says I can't be species specific. And when I'm looking at species specific, we begin to codify that or set that as a design standard, which we'll talk about in more detail. I want to improve visibility with lighting and transparent building materials. Again, I'm going to codify that as well because I want to bring those eyes to the street, going back to Jane Jacobs. How can I look out on the street when I don't have windows? How can I look out of the street at nighttime when I don't have proper lighting? So these are things we cover as part of the CPTED program. Some good examples of natural surveillance as I look at these sites, for example, on the left-hand side, you see a desk and you see 2 people standing behind that. So notice all the transparency, and that is going to be the reception area of this building. As the employee sits there, they're able to see what? Everything. They're able to see who's approaching the building, who's parking their car, who's entering, and landscaping. They maintain that landscaping so it doesn't impact the view of the person sitting there looking out. Sometimes we refer to that desk design as workstation orientation. How do I maximize that surveillance outward? Upper right-hand corner, a lot of our buildings have windows, we just don't use them. So imagine under our strategies, we include seating right at that window. So as people are working on their computers or they're reading, they can glance out the window, bringing more surveillance out into the main entryway, eyes on the street, being able to observe a threat as it approaches the building. But we do that through ensuring that those windows are placed on that side of the building. And then on the lower right-hand side, you see a school. And schools, we look at movement coming through, we look at pedestrian corridors. So how do I bring more pedestrians to that side, providing windows to bring more eyes out towards the entryway, more eyes out towards the lobby? Again, making it for the offender, making it more difficult for the offender to be successful. Natural surveillance, we look at lighting. Want to avoid lighting that creates glare or shadows. And then avoid the creation of building entrapment areas. So on the right-hand side, I'm not going to go into which city hall this is, but that is an entryway to a city hall for employees coming to this building. And you can see the person standing at the bottom. So if we start looking at some of the building designs, there are a lot of entrapment areas, what we sometimes refer to as ambush points, where you cannot see around the corner. So because it's designed that way, we have to use other strategies to address that, which in this case might require a mirror. So again, but why was it even built that way in the first place? Why am I blocking that view? And the lighting on the left, we talked about avoiding glare or shadows. We have lighting standards that we talked about, which we'll address in more detail a little bit later on. No glare. Again, I want to provide those eyes in that corridor, and lighting plays an important component of that as well. Natural access control. How do I control access to the site? How do I physically guide you into that main entryway? How do I design the street? How do I design the sidewalk? What landscaping do I use on that site? Well, first thing, I know it sounds really simple saying it, but we don't see it when we look at some of our buildings. Ensure that entrances are visible, well lit, and overlooked by windows. If you notice in the photo on the right, you see that face that's kind of looking out, eyes on the street. There's Jane Jacobs looking out to see who's approaching the building. So we want it to be visible, well lit. Clearly define the entryway. We want to highlight that. The term that we use is celebrate the entryway. We want to eliminate all the excuses why people get lost. I didn't know where to go. So they wind up going to the wrong side. In turn, security or law enforcement has to respond. Staff has to respond. Can I help you? Well, I'm trying to get into the building. Well, you need to go that way. People just get lost. You don't know where to go. So besides celebrate, we want to highlight that. We start looking at our focal points to guide you, transition you from the minute you park your car all the way up to the sidewalk into the main entryway. So we want to clearly mark those walkways and paths. And then we want to include a comprehensive wayfinding system that gets you to where you need to go to. And we want all of that to be at pedestrian scale. We want to make the decision-making easy for people that want to visit that site or use the space. Because the more comfortable we are, the more likely we will continue to use that space, continue to bring more eyes to that site, and again, making it difficult for the offender to be successful. Natural access control. If we take a look at a typical design, now here's a school. First thing we look at, that celebrated entryway. Notice the height of that entryway as we approach the building. All of our sidewalks lead us where? To the main entryway. And to bring more visual activity to the site, notice the color of the bollards that are there, the decorative stones, using red and yellow. The best colors to attract attention, red and bright lemon yellow. So I'm bringing your eyes in. That becomes the focal point. You're transitioning into the main entryway. I have windows overlooking that entryway, bringing more eyes to that site, again, making it difficult for the offender. My normal users, people that want to be in that space or to use that space, feel very comfortable because they feel if something that happened, people will be able to see them and respond to that. They feel safe and comfortable. They'll continue to use that space. But I want you to see, based off natural access control, how every sidewalk, every crosswalk takes you where? To the main entryway of that building. Territorial reinforcement, another strategy that we focus on. We talked about physical attributes that express ownership. This will get into the use of fencing, not any type of fencing, which we'll talk about in more detail, but decorative see-through fencing. Now we're going to get into the codes and standards in just a little bit. It would surprise you to know that many cities now have codified the type of fencing that's allowed on your property, which is going to be decorative see-through fencing. Why the decorative see-through fencing? Well, surveillance. I can see what's taking place. Eyes on the property, eyes on the street. Use of pavement treatments. Again, we're trying to show ownership, territorial reinforcement. So the pavers play an important part of that as you transition from your public space to your private space. And then the use of signage, which is designed right at pedestrian scale. And then we look at having sign that reflects the building. So we're extending the footprint of the building a little further by the use of signage and pavement treatments, letting everyone know, hey, you're coming onto our property. And so we see a change in behavior, we see a change in ownership. This also includes landscaping, lighting, and design elements. So let's talk a little bit about landscaping under territorial reinforcement. Under landscaping, we follow something called the 2-foot, 6-foot rule, which means landscaping, low ground cover, not to exceed 2 feet in height. Lower tree canopy is going to be 6 foot and higher. Working with our landscape architects, we codify that so we're species specific. And as a result of that, we provide what? Surveillance. Now, as you approach my building, you can see what's taking place. As you approach the campus, you can see what's taking place. As you approach the main entry of the school, you can see what's taking place. So maintenance does not become an issue. So there's value in that when we think about savings. Lighting, under the CPTED model, lighting has two purposes. And the main purpose for the illumination of human activity. So people can see where they're going to. And so now we start looking at lighting type. We get into LED lighting, we get into cutoff fixtures, we get into Kelvin temperature, color rendering index, which is all codified as part of the city requirements. Now for private sector, that becomes your design guidelines or your construction standards. And then all design elements, which in many cases, some of those design elements, we have input from the people using that space to create this sense of ownership. This is our building, this is our site, we're going to take care of it. I enjoy coming here, I enjoy being part of this community. An example of territorial reinforcement, this is going to be a school. Notice a nice wide sidewalk. So we get into streetscape design a little bit later on, but notice the fencing, see-through fencing. So I can see what's taking place. Students on the inside can look out. To extend that ownership even into more detail a little further, there's some information the students put on the fence. You know, it could have been World History Week, it could have been history of the school, but as you're walking, you can read about the school itself, and then you start to transition into the main entryway. You've got your bollards. Notice the landscaping, the trees are nice and high. Now I could have added some low ground cover that to soften up the concrete just a bit. I could have added additional pavers that reflect the school itself and that ownership, guiding people into the main entryway. And all these fall under just good design practices or good design guidelines. Maintenance, again, I cannot emphasize maintenance enough under the CPTED program, and that's going to be key for us because we talk about the continued use of a space for its intended. A lot of us deal with this regularly when we think about ownership, graffiti on the building. Because we live in such a warm place with a lot of sunlight, paint has a tendency of fading over time. So there is no ownership. We don't water our grass for the amount of sunshine we get. That's going to injure that. So again, we want to show that ownership. And this ties into territorial reinforcement also. Overgrown landscaping blocking our view and operative lighting. Again, we want to have a strategy to address that because as lights start to go out, we have less ownership. People don't want to use that space as well. And the issue we have quite a bit of is, notice landscape, operative lighting. Our landscaping will block our lights. So now we have dark spots, which we'll highlight a little bit later on. So maintenance is going to be key for me when I think about that ownership. Here's some examples of maintenance. Let's take a look at the left-hand side. Notice the light in the center of that tree. Can you imagine the light output that fixture is going to have? It's just not going to be proper. It's going to be dark there. And you're going to see an example in just a bit. So now I can't see at nighttime, which in turn might lead to more opportunities for crime. Now I'm losing my eyes on the street. Now that witness potential decreases quite a bit because even people in the office right next to this space looking out, they're just going to see darkness because of where we place the tree and the light. On the right-hand side, I got a great looking decorative see-through fence. But because I wasn't species specific on the landscaping, what's happened? Well, it's blocked the view. Now, the property owner is going to spend quite a bit of money to maintain that or to correct that. One, if it would have been designed right the first way, going back to Tim Crow, then I wouldn't have to deal with this because we'd be site specific, species specific, and maintenance wouldn't be an all-consuming factor when I think about the continued use of that space. So a lot of opportunities to get this done or make it happen for us. 3Ds of CPTED. All human space has some designated purpose. So think about the building, think about the site, think about the neighborhood. People are going to live there. People are going to work there. They're going to go out for outdoor activity, a park. Again, looking at a university, a school, people go there to learn. All human space has social, cultural, legal, or physical definitions that prescribe the desired and acceptable behaviors. This is where you enter. This is where you come into the main area. This is where you check in. This is where you transition through. That space is designed to support and control the desired behavior. Something as simple as, I know how to get into this building. I know where to park. I know where the sidewalks are. I know how to enter into the main entryway. I know where the elevators are. I know where the offices is that I need to go to, because it's designed to support that behavior. So under designation, what is the designated purpose of the space? What do we want to do there? If we take a look at a park, how do I want people to enter? Where do I want the kids to play? Where do I want the playground equipment? Where do I want to place the restrooms for those people using the park? What purpose was it originally intended? Is it new construction or is it a renovation? Now, new construction is a lot easier for me to focus on the intentions or what we want to take place in the building. On a retrofit, it's a little more challenging for me as a Septa practitioner. And how well the space support its current use or its intended use. And for me, that ties into wayfinding. How do I get into the space? Is the seating in the right spot? Is everything located easy for me to get to that from, for example, the reception into the main lobby, out to the exterior? Is there conflict? Do people get lost? Do they do not know where to go? Where are the elevators at? Again, the design does not support, or that use of space does not support the behavior. So there is going to be some conflict. How's it defined? Are we defining that through pavers? And we talked about that, decorative see-through fencing, landscaping, lighting, all elements to show ownership as we define that space, because we want to be very clear who owns it. And again, if I can extend that ownership beyond the building all the way to the sidewalk, I'm going to start focusing on that change of behavior as people transition into that space. So where it's borders, can I really show ownership and define that where I look at the borders people transition in? Definition that affect how the space is used. Again, when we're talking about weekend use, we're talking about a house of worship. We're talking about schools only used 5 days a week, different activities on the weekends. Rules, directives, so they clearly set out and reinforce, and policies. So for us, we get those directives out right in the front. We want to eliminate all the excuses why people do not comply with the rules. For example, school setting, must check in with the desk. No alcohol involved, no weapons involved. Hours of operation. Again, you must get a pass to enter before you come to this space. Again, if this is in the building, this is where you go to. So we want to set those rules out very clearly, and we want them to be at pedestrian scale. And that ties right into the signs as well, as we set the directives out. Signs tie into wayfinding. We define the use of that space and get you to where you need to go to. But all these are at pedestrian scale. Does the physical design support the intended functions? Do people know exactly where to go as they approach the building? And does it support the desired accepted behaviors? Again, do people know where to sit? Do they know where to go? Do they realize something as simple as that's the main entryway? That's how I get into that space. And we want to eliminate all the confusion or conflict because when we talk about controlling behavior, I want you to go exactly where I want you to go. So I'm going to design those as you begin to transition in. I want you to get to this point. I want you to get to this point. I want you to get to this point as you enter the building. So we want to eliminate all the confusion or any conflict based off the design of that site. We want to provide that clear border definition to control space. That control space is mine. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical barrier. It can be a decorative element to show that ownership, and that goes into territorial reinforcement. Transition zones that indicate that movement from public to semi-public to private space. Again, public space, we all know is difficult to control activity there, but the minute you start to transition over to my, I can really highlight that through good design strategies to show you coming into my space. And in the private space, again, we have that celebrated entryway using those focal points to get you exactly where you need to go to. Gathering areas, where do we place them? A lot of us deal with outdoor gathering areas. We want to design those in a way so we bring more wind or surveillance out into that main entryway. Bring more surveillance out, we might have questionable activity or behavior, bringing those eyes out to that spot. And all that ties into access control. Again, bring you to where you need to go to. And I can increase the perception of reality of natural surveillance by looking at movement. I began to look at pedestrian corridors. I began to look at how people move from point A to point B. And by rerouting that foot traffic, I can bring more surveillance to a certain area. I can add windows. And again, windows, there's this perception that someone's behind those windows looking out. So a lot of opportunity to improve that feeling that someone's watching what's taking place. Safe activities in unsafe locations to promote that natural surveillance, perception of safety, and then place unsafe activities in safe spots to overcome the vulnerability. For example, a safe act in an unsafe location. I've got a main entryway. I might provide outdoor seating for my employees or staff to sit there, which is a safe activity, people coming together and interacting socially. The unsafe location might be the entryway into my building. Not unsafe where they're at risk, but that's where the threat is coming from. So I'm bringing more eyes out to where I might be vulnerable. Just more surveillance to observe that movement as people transition in from the transit stop, the parking lot, into the building. I have an activity taking place to observe that movement, but I have to design that location in such a way that encourages people to sit there and use that. So a lot of thought goes into how we design those activities or those locations. Unsafe activities and safe spots, something as simple as looking at a park. Let's say in a park I have young kids and I want to design a kid space. So that kid space for toddlers, do I put it right by the sidewalk or by the street or the parking lot, or do I centralize that in the center of the park? So now people have to transition in to use that space. I'm going to put it in the center. I'm going to look at providing decorative see-through fencing around where the kids are playing, so they've got a good view of someone who's approaching that, because that unsafe act is a child wandering away or an abduction. So I want to place it in such a location so we've got good surveillance of people approaching that, and design it in such a way that parents take ownership and they can observe those people that are approaching where the young kids are playing. Unsafe activity and safe spot. If I'm looking at another type of setting, for example, a healthcare facility, would I put my pharmacy, for example, right at the main entryway? Well, no, that unsafe activity might be a robbery or a theft, so I'm going to put it in my building. If I'm looking at a store design, do I place the register right at the doorway? No, I might put that deeper into my building. Articles that have a high value, do I put them at the main entryway or deeper? I'm going to put that deeper into my building. So which might be unsafe, theft, I'm going to make it a little more difficult for the offender to be successful based on how I place that activity. CPTED strategy should also include, we talked about fencing and walls, offers transparency for surveillance. Now, a good example for students at USF is the fence around the campus. Now, we actually got involved with this in the 90s when I was with the police department. We talked about adding fencing, and there was a lot of resistance to this early on, and I can understand why. And this, I deal with this throughout the country. We want our campus to be open and inviting, and I understand that. But again, we look at calls for service and opportunities for offenders to transition into that space. Some thought went into the design of that. Notice the branding of the fence, territorial reinforcement, the logo of the bull on the side of that creates a sense of community. Provide character to the area. Oh, that's USF. I can see that based off the fencing. Now, the next step I would have taken in this design would have been maybe to add some low decorative ground cover or landscaping to that. Again, to soften up the look of that, but be species specific, working with my landscape architect, will that have a maximum growth of 2 feet. This is code in many, many cities. Now, I know I've referenced that quite a bit, but I just want you to, as we transition into the design guidelines, how cities are starting to mandate a lot of these design elements to provide that surveillance. Eyes on the street, going back to Jane Jacobs, territorial reinforcement, natural access control. We worked with USF Campus Police. They attend some of the workshops under the governor's office. And again, just interviewing some of them, some of the calls for service, you have fewer people that are transitioning or cutting through the campus with those designated entryways, which allows people to monitor, well, who comes in and out of that campus. Other strategies we look at or should address, areas of concealment. This is a big concern for us when we work with designers. On the left, we have a gateway transitioning to a waterfront on a trail. This is going to be in Kansas City, Missouri. We work with several groups here. Now, the issue they have is because there's no lighting, people like to use this during the evening hours, is that you have an obstructed view. You cannot see what's taking place as you want to use or approach that waterfront. And you can see some of the students there kind of sticking their heads around the side. It gives you an idea of the scale. Now, as a CPTED practitioner working with the design team, I would have gone with maybe some kind of archway with, instead of solid stone, something a little more transparent, something I could see through, maybe some ornamental ironwork that's placed there. So now I don't create the air of concealment. If I'm designing it for you to use it, I want it to be safe. On the right, this is in Greenville, South Carolina. If you take a look, you've got two of the students walking in, and that's the area of concealment in an entertainment corridor. Looking at the original site plans, I would have just seen a concrete wall. And knowing there's a waterfront, now I'm losing the opportunity for surveillance from the top down and from the bottom up. Let's even look at law enforcement. As they're walking along this path to see what's taking place above them, we block their view entirely. Now, my recommendation on this would have been, can we go with some kind of ornamental or decorative fencing to still maintain that visual connection? So again, lots of recommendations we can make when we start looking at areas of concealment and ambush points. Here's an example of a school. We'll talk about schools a little bit more detail. This is an older elementary school. This is in Gainesville, Florida. We had the team doing an assessment of this property. Now, notice the photo on the left, you're looking through or looking down the corridor. How many areas of concealment do you see based off the design of that school? On the right, you see all the team members taking their heads up, saying, I can hide here, I can hide here, I can hide here, I can hide here. The issue we're dealing with today is active shooters. So how do I address that after construction? These are things that CPTED practitioners are able to do by maybe adding mirrors, by looking at other decorative elements, by looking at doorway design or placement. Worse than here, maybe adding some kind of physical security component, which isn't a CPTED component, but maybe some design elements to improve surveillance along that walkway. And this is what we're dealing with building after building after building, especially some of our older buildings. Areas of concealment, landscaping. This is an entryway coming into a community center. Now, facility maintenance designed this in such a way to use the landscaping to show ownership. Great idea, but the location is what's a big concern for us. Can you see beyond that, especially for nighttime use, because you see no lighting, but I know we use this building at nighttime. So how many of you can see the offender right in the landscape? And then you realize, oh my gosh, there they are, as you walk out to use your car, especially during the evening hours. Throw this tie this into an elementary school that's used at nighttime for community events. Look at a community center, look at a movie theater, looking at a campus at nighttime use. Sometimes we create the areas of concealment. We create the opportunities for the offender to commit that crime. So we have to address those areas of concealment constantly as we go from site to site. Lighting plays an important component for this. Remember on our CPTED strategy, lighting for illumination of human activity, and then lighting for security. So let's look at the two on the left. Lighting standards. That is probably the poorest lighting we can use. Non-optical acorn fixture with no shielding. The light goes up in the sky. It's not on the ground where it needs to be. And I don't know if you can notice, there's someone standing directly underneath the light. Can you imagine the officers showing up on that site to take the report? Well, excuse me, so the person that attacked you, where were they hiding? They were hiding directly under the light. That's kind of hard for us to picture that because we think lighting is the thing that lights up a whole space, but it doesn't based off the type of lighting. On the right-hand side, we have the light shining down, which is codified in many jurisdictions. So on the right, I'm not even concerned what you're wearing. We designed that lighting in such a way to keep the light on the ground. And if we're talking sustainability, we're not wasting energy. Lighting where you need it, and we codify that. And then we get into Kelvin temperature, we get into color rendering index, which all CPTED practitioners are aware of as they began to work with cities or private sector groups to look at lighting and improving witness potential. This ties into camera placement as well, and just the feeling of comfort that people use that space. We want to activate spaces. That's key for our CPTED practitioners also. I mean, on the left, you've got a blank wall that we've added a mural. I just did a workshop through another group called Using Public Corporate Art as a Crime Prevention Strategy. And a lot of emphasis now, and this ties into territorial reinforcement, natural access control. It ties into placemaking, tactical urbanism, all things that tie into CPTED. But here on the left, you show that ownership. Again, the community cares about the site. On the upper right-hand side, we've got our signal box program. We've got this artist painting a signal box to show ownership. The city of Tampa is involved with that as well. In the center, you have the USF Bulls. And Joel will attest to this too. The last time we were out there, we had our son, we took a picture just to get the picture of the Bulls behind us. That ties into what? Wayfinding, territorial reinforcement. This becomes your focal point as you see that, oh, there's the center. This is what guides me into that space. And on the right, this out of Louisville. And this Louisville is known for the Kentucky Derby. So again, these horses are set up throughout the city. Artists paint them. People walk through that corridor to see that. This also ties into economic development. We put this temporary artwork in different spots to encourage people to walk there and maybe shop in some of those stores that they wouldn't normally go to. Not a lot of eyes, opportunity for crime, using art, bringing more eyes to the space, showing ownership. Again, so lots of ways we can apply these strategies. Now, one area that I want to cover, because we talked about guidelines, design, codes, strategies, surveillance, wayfinding, lighting, we codify it. And I cannot emphasize that enough. A lot of cities are now codifying CPTED. So from 1971, C. Ray Jeffries talking about this, 73, you get into defensible space, and you get into with Tim Crow. Then you go back to 61 with Jacobs or Eyes on the Street. How do I ensure that's done? we codify it. So MuniCode is the way you can go to or take a look at this. Would it surprise you to know that the state of Florida, we did a workshop with one group and we put all the data together. There's currently 65 city or county codes that emphasize the use of SEPTED in the state of Florida. That's just our state. That's just the state of Florida. I'm going to highlight a couple of those as we go through this with you to give you some idea of what counties are doing. From so 71, we began to see what we're starting to apply SEPTED, how it works for us, to how do we make it work today. So here we're going to start with Hillsborough County. That's right here at Tampa. So first thing under site development plan design standards. Now, a lot of people are surprised when they learn, especially criminologists, because when I started at USF and looking at this, I wasn't fully aware of what we could really do with SEPTED. And then I got involved with planning and urban design. I realized, oh my God, we can just place this throughout the entire city. So the county, Hillsborough County, SEPTED, talk about the proper design and effective use. So I'm not going to read all of these. I'm just going to highlight some portion of these. We go through this. SEPTED principles, provision of the act. Minimum of one SEPTED strategy from each of the principles shall be incorporated into the site design phase for all applicable development. Now, natural surveillance, reduce opportunities, reduce those opportunities for crime. And we're going to go back to C. Ray Jeffries, limit those opportunities for crime. We talked about limit those chances for the offender to come onto that space unobserved. We're going to improve that with natural surveillance, easily identifiable store entrances, accelerated entryways. The natural access control, increase visibility in and around that site to help reduce crime. And we see the strategies that are listed underneath that as well. Territorial reinforcement, features that can be used, private areas, public space to show that ownership. Now, the second bullet point underneath, landscaping, special pavement, low. We talked about that early on. Transition zones, public space, directional, similar signs, wayfinding, welcoming, and the type of fencing that's allowed. And then maintenance, which is a key part. Talk about that continued ownership of that space. We look at the town of Jupiter. Again, they've taken some really nice steps in applying SEPTED, supplementary district regulations. This is codified. Again, so designers have to ensure they meet these standards, because if not, they cannot go through the permitting process. So we refer to this for as codified. SEPTED standards shall be incorporated into all new development in the district through the following methods. Natural access control, ornamental fencing. We gave you some example of that. Street trees, planting beds, structures. We'll replace them. So now we're talking about building setbacks, building orientation to maximize surveillance outward, and that ties in with the transparency with as much as 70%, so we can see what's taking place around us. Natural surveillance, want to work our way down, balconies, outdoor seating. What we see now in many cities on single family home is we codify the use of front porches, or the standard. So now we've codified front porches on single family home. This encourages families to do what? Use that front porch, use the front door a little more often, bringing more eyes where? More eyes out on the street. Incorporation of artwork, ownership, murals, sculptures, public place. We want to eliminate those blank walls, facades, and it brings attention, more eyes on that site, and then community ownership, because a lot of the artwork is based on local artists. Natural surveillance, here in Jupiter, they follow the 3-foot, 7-foot rule, which again, as long as your design team sets that as a standard, and here's a design guideline, as you see in the image, to let designers, developers know this is what the city is looking for as they look at their landscaping. Territorial reinforcement, this ties into ownership as well. Public, semi-public, semi-private, and private space. The location, here's your design guideline on the right from the town of Jupiter. Opportunities for different levels of access. We want it to be interesting. We want it to be fun. We want to engage people to take ownership, which also ties into economic development. So again, think about all the partnerships you can create with your SEPTED program as you move forward. City of Grand Rapids put together an amazing program. We worked with them for many years. We've done several workshops there. We're getting ready to do a few more. SEPTED ordinance, crime prevention, environmental design, title, purpose, and scope shall be noted as a SEPTED ordinance of the City of Grand Rapids. Purpose and intent. Now, notice the highlight right at the bottom. SEPTED draws on passive strategies incorporated into normal planning, design, of the built environment. So strategies we can apply. And this is where SEPTED practitioners need to be involved in the entire process when we think about codifying these. SEPTED, now this was a key section of their their ordinance. And so I'm kind of going to work my way through this one with you. Septa enhances community policing. And so when we think about what today is like, limited budgets, again, people talk about defunding the police, fewer police officers that are out there. How does the community take ownership? Well, Septa, this also ties into self-policing by the community and collaboration between property owners and residents in neighborhoods. Creation of a safe environment, both real and perceived. Again, we show that ownership and maintenance. People take responsibility. The offenders feel like someone's taking ownership. Placemaking to foster community belonging and ownership, and that discourages criminal behavior. Talk about healthy, safe, practical solutions to neighborhood issues. Not all about the police. It's the community working with other city departments or county departments to make changes. Coordinate these activities, communicate. We've really got to start getting everyone involved in this process of limiting those opportunities for crime. Human scale, pedestrian oriented, and that's an important component of Septa. Relation-based community can help encourage and maintain community self-policing efforts. If the community has a vested interest in the site, then we start focusing on the design of that site. They take that ownership, reduce the need for city resources and police intervention. What we find time and time again is fewer calls for police service because the community takes ownership of that space. And then purpose and intent, implementation of Septa principles to create that safe environment. And they've got some elements we look at, some charts or graphs that you follow for the city of Grand Rapids. And then go into the Septa or city code. This includes zoning ordinance, nuisance code, and building maintenance code. So a lot of thought went into their first Septa ordinance. Now the city of Tampa has several. And I was excited to be part of many of these with my time with the city. So I'm just going to highlight a few of these going through this. Public safety, as far as the design standards under zoning and land development, you see Septa listed throughout. Highlighted Septa principles throughout the regulatory review process. So that means as these site plans are coming through the review, those Septa components must be met as part of the permitting. We start talking about the East Tampa overlay. We see Septa listed throughout this as well. Further the principles of Septa throughout that process. These standards, these minimum requirements must be met to obtain design approval. Must be met. So I have a lot of Septa practitioners now that are teaming up with city governments to review these plans to make sure in compliance with the code. For the purpose, the city of Tampa safety, the philosophy is there, have been incorporated throughout the regulatory review process. And now we see this in the Kennedy Boulevard vision perspective. So this continues to grow within the city of Tampa. West Shore, Septa, we see that throughout. West Shore district, or the West Shore Business District was the largest business district business district corridor in the state of Florida. They were the first overlay district to utilize Septa in the city, and our Septa team was involved with that right from the beginning. So how seriously does the police department take this? I'm going to have a chance to be involved with this early on. So you take a look, here's the organizational chart for the police department, chief of police. Now let's transition over to the orange section, right-hand side. You're going to see the Special Operations Division. And as you work your way through, in the circle, you see the Septa unit. The city of Tampa was one of the first cities in the U.S. to create a Septa unit. And I was excited about that because they helped put the original plans together. We got to be part of that. And at the time, there were 3 of us assigned to the Septa unit that were full-time. That's how seriously we took the program. Other cities are doing similar or applying similar concepts and strategies, and including law enforcement throughout the process. Broward County, I'm going to go through this one very quickly as well. Septa for the site plan review process. Natural surveillance, natural access control, we can include that or include that throughout the site. Implementation of the principles is listed throughout. Septa review, and they even go as far as Septa training, what it takes to be a member of that Septa team under Broward County. The training, minimum of 2 plan review personnel must be trained in Septa, and other personnel, particularly public works, should be trained in order to maximize the benefits of Septa. Here's a review process they go through, and this is part of the County Department of Strategic Planning and Growth Management. City of Tempe, one of the oldest programs that's out there, so we've done a lot of work with them, and then you see Septa listed throughout their design guidelines. And here's some of the articles they put together and some of the design guidelines as well. What we're excited about in the Septa community was the state of Virginia. Now, the Virginia just passed a state statute, and this had a lot to do with the American Institute of Architects. Some of those comes with the Septa training, where by state statute, architects must understand the concepts of Septa, and then the review shall include those Septa components. That is required by state statute. For Florida, as we transition through, we have the Florida Safe School Design Guidelines. Now, this was done in 2003 by the University of Florida. The first school to do this, the first school to put together those Safe School Design Guidelines, ready? 1993, University of South Florida. First one to put those together, which in turn now we see that transition over to the Department of Education to include SEPTED throughout the process when we look at new of educational facilities along with retrofits and redesign. The Department of Homeland Security now includes SEPTED, and we're very fortunate to have them involved with us early on, their specialist competencies. They sent the curriculum writer for Homeland Security along with their head of counterterrorism to a workshop we're doing in Boise, Idaho to determine whether or not SEPTED was an important component. A year and a half later, this publication came out. 4.1.4, crime prevention through environmental design. And this is a requirement for all security specialist competencies they must meet at the national level. For an effective interior and exterior building environment that reduces fear, deters crime and terrorist activity. And that's surveillance, territorial enforcement, natural access control, and facility hardening as one of those strategies. So all of this blending together for us. An important component for SEPTED is this, the International Organization for Standardization, ASIS. I worked with ASIS on this one. A good friend of ours was involved with this. He got the chair of the committee, had a chance to review these. The ISO is now set the standard for SEPTED internationally. The South Koreans have been involved with this since about the late 90s. And now the ISO said, this is what SEPTED will look like. This is how we'll apply it. This is going to really emphasize or really have an impact on security specialists. As far as cities, we think about design guidelines and standards, not as much so because we start looking at incorporating those under urban design strategies. Now for physical security, again, ASIS has their own standards for that, but to see this take place was amazing. They just signed off on it and we're excited about it because now anywhere in the world, what is SEPTED? This is what it is. This is the standards you have to follow. And the US had a strong fingerprint in this in ensuring those were met because it's tied into the SEPTED that we see in the US. It reflects that. So any training taken in the US reflects directly into those international standards that we see around the world based off the ISO. As far as groups that are involved, again, we see a lot of work that's out there. Different cities are involvement when they conduct assessments. First thing you take a look at these, Marina High School, SEPTED Security Assessment, SEPTED Home Security Checklist, SEPTED Survey, Evansville Police Department, you've got Greenville, South Carolina, you got the city of Palmdale, you got Security Checklist, you've got California, again, their design standards. If you notice the one on the upper right-hand side corner though, SEPTED School Assessment. The CDC was involved in putting that one together. And the CDC really spent some time organizing this. Now, the team that was involved with this, they're SEPTED practitioners out of Florida. And it's one of the better manuals that I've seen out there as far as use. It focuses on a true SEPTED approach to applying these in school design and safety. This is purely a check off the box as you look at the school. Now, since we're talking about Florida and the team that put this together, also the Florida under healthcare facilities on the Department of Health put together a similar check off the box form. And this is one we tied in with the Attorney General's office. We conducted the training for this with SEPTED for healthcare facilities. The main component for that was going to be SEPTED strategies first, supplemented with physical security. So we not only see that at the state level, we see that at the federal level as well. As we began to look at sites, for example, working with different agencies that are out there, for example, New York City counterterrorism law enforcement that's come through the training, and they started to adopt a lot of these concepts as well. How do we design it? How do we apply it? If I can't do it that way, let's supplement that with physical security. And we see that from police departments around the country. So good design, good design, good design, supplement with physical security. And we also see that as a strategy with a lot of our physical security consultants as well. So some opportunities to get that done as we begin to share that throughout the site. So a lot of success with these as we look at those, but not only at that level, as we look at schools. Now schools, we saw what happened here in Florida. This is a concern for everyone around the nation. And some of the booklets that are out there, magazines that we see, SEPTED Design Elements, Designing Safe Schools, SEPTED for Schools, SEPTED Design Elements on this one, and SEPTED Benefits as we look at these. Now, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas committee that was out there that had to do with the Parkland shooting had a chance to speak to them under the Attorney General's umbrella. And we talked about implementing SEPTED statewide. And we had a lot of positive feedback from parents that had kids in the schools. And The question was, can you do this at our school now? So the Department of Education adopted some of those under the Florida Safe School Design Guidelines. Based off that, we saw the state of Virginia, which I mentioned, they began to set that as a state statute requirement. So Florida, we're right in there when we think about school safety and design, because how many of us had input into school design? A lot of us don't. Many times, how much input does law enforcement have as we think about school design and safety? We normally don't. Crime analysis. And when we even think about new construction for a site, how many designers look at crime analysis taking place around the property and design with that in mind? And we don't see that happening a lot. So an opportunity for us to do this way or get it done this way can have a big impact on what we're looking at when we think about some of the recommendations that are out there. If we take a look at the Department of Education, if we take a look at maybe standardizing this at a national level, that's ultimately one of our goals when we think about the use of CPTED and the applications. So again, just think about you as a CPTED practitioner, how you can make this work, how you can apply that to the site, and then think about maybe codifying those and ensuring they're part of those design standards. Students want to learn. So when we think about adding that natural light through window placement, then we look at workstation orientation. We want students maybe involved in the design process because they know what's taking place, especially when we're doing assessments after the fact. And I encourage law enforcement that's involved with this, ask the kids, hey, where do you have issues in this campus? Where do people go? Where are these activities taking place? And in turn, share that because not all crimes reported. And we have to understand that going into this. Well, what does the data tell me? Well, the data tells me one thing. What about that user interview? Where are these incidents taking place? And once I pull that information together, remember, now I know where to address these. Now, when we asked why wasn't this reported, well, I didn't think it wasn't important enough. I didn't want to tie up the police. I didn't want to notify there was no big deal. Well, we want to know where this is taking place. So think about ways you can incorporate this the process. So I'm going to turn this over to Joelle, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other groups that we work with over time.
So since we've started the training, we've had many corporations, government agencies, nonprofits, and educational institutions that have sent their personnel or hosted the training. So most have adopted the CPTED strategies to their current sites and are adapting them or adopting them for their future facilities. So we've worked with, many, this is just a few of the companies that we've worked with. We've heard back from a number of them because they send new employees through or different people through. So for example, we heard back from the people at Glock that after their initial group came through the training, that they completely redesigned their public entryway for their headquarters in Smyrna, Georgia. So it's funny to get these, or it's great to get these feedback from people as they start to apply it and utilize it. We've also worked with, next slide please, a number of government agencies and nonprofits to work on things for them or to incorporate. So this is just a few of them. For the American Institute of Architects, they offer 40 CEUs for people that come through our training. The American Planning Association allows for 8 maintenance CMUs for their people. The Department of Transportation has us listed on their website recommending CPTED training for the people that are involved in projects with the Department of Transportation. So, and one other area that people are focusing on more now is health. And so we have a multi-year grant with the Department of Health and Senior Services in Missouri to provide CPTED training to a variety of people that are involved throughout the state in the issues of health. So it's schools and libraries and hospitals and public health agencies. So they're sending large numbers of people through the training so that they can start applying it, because they feel that if people feel more comfortable with their communities, then they're more apt to go out and use them, be active outside. And so then they would be possibly more likely to exercise and be more physically fit and healthy. And so that it correlates. So the safety correlates into being more active. And then the next slide is just a list. I'm not going to go over all of these, but this is a list of some of the universities that have participated in our training, sending a variety of personnel such as architects, facilities maintenance, campus security directors, campus police, and faculty through the CPTED training. So our goal, the company's goal, is to provide the best and most accurate training possible with a hands-on approach, so we help participants gain the knowledge and confidence to implement CPTED in their community, organization, school, or corporation. So we have developed a curriculum that provides the principles of CPTED along with hands-on practical application exercises, including charrettes, blueprint reviews, and field assessments for a variety of settings. We divided the CPTED principles into our basic and advanced courses. In the basic course, we cover the topics that are listed here. So everybody gets a general feel for what CPTED is and how it can be applied. This is where we talk about codifying it. This is how we talk about forming partnerships with your planning and zoning departments, how to write a report. So they get a understanding and be able to go back and apply it right away in their community. For the advanced course, we cover more specialized topics such as schools, color and human behavior, terrorism, transportation, and parks. And then for participants that have already completed the basic and advanced course that were interested in adding additional information to their CPTED toolbox, we've developed some specialized topics courses that they can take as well. So in 2013, we decided that after being asked by a number of our participants that they wanted to have some type of a designation or certification that they could have to represent their level of understanding of CPTED. We had developed a similar program for the Florida Crime Prevention Training Institute underneath the Attorney General's office, but people outside the state of Florida wanted something as well. So we put together a curriculum and guidelines for people earning the designation outside the state of Florida that sort of mirrored the same professional standards that we had developed with the state. So we require that they take 64 hours of training, so they must complete the basic and the advanced course. They are required to do 6 graded hands-on activities and take 2 exams. And once they complete that successfully, then they have the designation for 4 years, and then it has to be renewed at that point. So we are interesting, like everyone else, we had always traditionally had all of our training in person. So we had been doing training for over 20 years and had always been in person because we felt that the networking and the hands-on activities and the field assignments were a very important part of our training. But then COVID happened, and all of a sudden that wasn't an option. So we were able to spend some time in March and April putting together an online training platform that mirrored the valuable information that we shared in person in an online format. So now we have all of our courses available online as well as in person. So we'd like to thank you again for joining us, and please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any other questions or need additional information.
So Art and Joelle, thank you so much. Art, I was greatly impressed that you were able to give that presentation in one breath. It was all extemporaneous. It was remarkable. Really, really cool. So, I want to kind of elab a little on some things that struck me, particularly for our graduate students. Not everybody who comes into a graduate program in criminology is going to exit with an advanced degree and go out and be a practitioner in a criminal justice agency, or come be a researcher for a university or an agency, or become a university professor. It's not for everybody, right? Those components aren't for everybody. The teaching, research, practice. What Art and Joelle have shown you is that there's a greatly, a massive opportunity in a private sector realm for your advanced degree to begin thinking about crime prevention as a way of making a living. Art and Joelle exemplify this with their National Institute for Crime Prevention, the training seminars they offer. They have been gracious to offer seats in their training institutes. 2 of our students have already, are going through it currently, Lexi Gill and Natasha Maloch. There can be room for others in the future if you are so interested, inclined, please let me know, and I will forward names on to Art and Joelle, and we'll see where it goes from there. I also see in this, for those who do like doing research, that there's all kinds of research opportunities around this idea of crime prevention, right? I mean, there's essentially what they do when called into an area is a needs assessment. Like, what kinds of CPTED kind of recommendations could they make, right? So there's needs assessments. Presuming that the entity wants to pursue further, then there's process evaluations to assess how, the fidelity that is being followed with regard to CPTED practices. There can be before after outcomes assessments to see if indeed CPTED intervention has the crime control, crime reduction capabilities that it argues to have, and there can be cost effectiveness assessments. So there's just a bunch of opportunities. There's data opportunities, research opportunities. So for those of you who are thinking about a thesis, a dissertation, a future employment, give this some thought. It's not for everybody, but neither is doing the kind of criminology that your faculty do. That's not necessarily for everybody either. So with that, what I will do is turn the time over for some Q&A. It will be best if you raise your hands electronically if you want to ask a question or make a comment or suggestion. I will call on you. You can open your mic at that time, and we'll take it from there. So any questions or comments from the audience, please? Fernando.
I work with some marginalized communities of different cultures, and I'm curious about how you incorporate cultural elements of given communities into the CPTED development of these facilities in their community.
All right, I can answer that. It's a great question, because when we work with communities, it's a real mixture of who lives there, and they need to have a voice in how the site is designed, all the way from housing, what the interior will look like, all the way to programming activities in the park that reflect the community, from the artwork, again, to how we use that space. So if we don't get input from them as part of that design team, or even on a renovation, we're losing that partnership to bring that ownership out there, which in turn we might see crime taking place. So it's that partnership again. They have to have a voice in how that's designed or how we use that space.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Fawn.
My question is, you mentioned this whole CPTED program is a holistic in the way that that CPTED understands environment is not only the physical dimension, but also programs that tap into it. I was curious to hear what are the alternatives, the framework of the police initiatives that CPTED frames within this concept.
As far as the police initiatives, our goal is to try to move the police away as quick as we can. Now, the police will help set up the foundation. They'll be part of the team. They understand crime, but very little time do they spend talking to designers and city planners on what design elements will help deter some of that behavior. For example, alleyway design, stairwell design, parking garage entry design. They might come in and recommend panoramic view elevators on a new construction to provide surveillance as you go from floor to floor. So again, they have to have a role in the beginning. Now, we always love to have a liaison from the police department there. We still like to have that person from the police department involved in the design review with city planners to sign off on those projects to ensure compliance with the code. So again, they play an important role. Now, some cities set the CPTED unit, as we saw with the Tampa Police Department. The city of Sacramento, California did something very similar. They assigned a sergeant at the time to lead the team. The city of Raleigh, for example, police department, we did a workshop there, and their chief came in and addressed it and sent 60 officers into the training, giving up a week and a half of their patrol duties to come in and learn CPTED to apply it back in their neighborhoods. So again, it all comes down to what you want to do with the program.
Thank you. Now, Fawn, I'm sorry I jumped the order.
No problem. Thank you, Art and Joelle, for a very interesting and informative presentation. So I study stalking, and sometimes I would hear stories about a certain celebrity whose home get broken in. And surely these individuals has the money to have 24-hour security, or they probably have very sophisticated security system. And yet these crimes still occur. And so I was wondering if you have had the opportunity to work with celebrities or politicians that consult with you to help them make sure that their homes or are safe, or that they could prevent crimes like being stalked or burglary, stuff like that.
Now,
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can address that through my time at the city police. I can tell you, from heads of corporations to generals in the military to you name it, we've done the assessment of their properties. So what I try to do now is I'll work with, for example, the security team or the groups that's there. They say, we have this project, and I will work them on the process of putting that together, what to look for, how to design it. We get so caught up in physical security, electronic security, that we lose that human factor. And that's the downside. Nothing beats being able to see, nothing beats who's my neighbor, nothing beats can you see who's on my property to call the police. No, I've got cameras, I'm safe. And so that's the issue that we're having now, is we get so comfortable in that bubble, we kind of lose the connections outside for safety and security. So, but yes, we have worked with quite a few in the past. I've worked with a lot of teams that do these. I hear some of the stories. Right now we have several members of I wasn't going to be dropping stuff, but Los Angeles Police Department are taking the training, and they're going back and doing some of the assessments themselves on some of the properties, because they said, how do we do it? How do we do it? Well, let me walk you through the process. So, but yes, to answer your question, yes, I have done some of those. So yeah.
Any other comments, questions? So when we originally set this up, this was a chance to meet the Hushins. That was how I originally thought of titling this. And we did get that opportunity to meet the Hushins, but we got to go well beyond that, right? I mean, as Art and Joelle were presenting what their National Institute for Crime Prevention does, what CPTED is, how it works, how it applies, it struck me that we also got to know them, right? And again, they are alumnus of the University of South Florida. They are friends of the department. They have sponsored some students going through their training. There's opportunity for more, potential opportunity for more. This is a place where you could find employment going forward outside of the academy, outside of law enforcement agencies, and still do good criminology. And I'm excited about that. One of the things that we are looking into, it's very nascent right now, it's emergent, is the current master's degree in criminal justice down on the Sarasota campus. And we want to grow this program. And one of the areas we're looking at, it's all an online master's degree program. So we want to build some concentrations within it. So it's not just a master's in criminal justice. You could get that, right? There could be this kind of generalist criminal justice master's degree through coursework, but we're also looking at various concentrations. And it strikes me that a great concentration would be in the area of crime prevention, in which CPTED could play a role. So we have a cohort of faculty, a small ad hoc committee that's going to begin to try to develop this kind of advancement of this master's degree out. I think we could begin to generate dozens of master's degrees annually in short order, and I think we could, within the area of crime prevention, that might be as much as half or more of those degrees. So excited about that. And I hope our relationship with Art and Joelle can continue and to grow and to prosper. I hope we get this damn not septet, what have I forgotten? Lord, we'll get this damn COVID behind us so that we can interact in ways other than electronically. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity. This does wrap up our first in the speakers series. I want to thank you both for participating, for presenting to us, for getting to meet you, allowing my faculty and grad students and colleagues to meet you both. You're good, decent people. You have exciting stuff going on. In November, we will bring back the Social Learning Theory Symposium that we were originally going to do on March 12th that got canceled because of COVID. We're going to try to do it again. And then we have 2 more prospective speaker series for the spring semester. One examining the issue of racial social justice, relationship Black and minority communities with law enforcement, and the role of the Department of Criminology in and about those issues. And couldn't be more timely, and we're excited about that. We're going to have the mayor kick that off for us. And then planning in our Wall of Fame. Wall of Fame is going to be modified slightly, rather than just kind of looking, here are awards to our wonderful alumni. We're going to do that too, but we're also going to make this more of an advance in our efforts at development. And so we're going to invite alumni rather than just past awardees to this event. We're going to try to brag about some of the cool stuff we're doing, and we're going to try to put the touch on some of these alumnus to help us out in our fundraising efforts. And the goal there is to ask Joan Reed to give us kind of a white paper, I guess, if you will, on the issue of human trafficking, which is, with coming to Tampa, being a port city with all the hotel, motel, and transportation hubs, it is a major issue in this area. So that can be exciting. I see Sean's got his hand up. Sean, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I'm not lit up. I don't know if I'm being seen. Oh, now I'm lit up.
Heard but not seen. Now you're seen too.
Okay. I got disconnected earlier. I just want to let you know, if you do something on law enforcement, I would symposium. I'd really like to be included in it, since I was a trooper for 10 years, and I can give some good information on the good and the bad. And I'm going to mute.
I had you in mind, frankly, when I was thinking of grad students for whom CPTED consulting, training, and then consulting could be a career option for you. So if you are interested, send me an email. I'll forward you to Art and Joelle, and things can happen from there. It would be valuable for you also to meet with Lexi and Natasha and hear about their experience with it as well. So, just send me an email and we'll work on it. Again, that's also an open invitation to all the grad students. Please understand, they cannot support all of you going through at one time. We're going to have to be selective. COVID affected the National Institute for Crime Prevention almost as much as it has affected, maybe even more so, than it affected us at the University of South Florida. So we're all kind of adapting, right? So we'll leave it at that for now. Art, Joelle, thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. To the invited guests, my grad students, my colleagues, staff, thank you for coming to this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you folks at the next one in November. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Virtual applause to you both.
Thank
you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.